A tale is told, a nice Jewish story is told of a band of inexperienced mountain climbers who were too arrogant to bring a guide along with them. They struck recklessly into the wilderness when suddenly a rocky ledge gave way beneath their feet and they were tumbled headlong into a dismal pit, like there's any other kind of pit. In the darkness of this dismal pit, they woke from their shock, brushed themselves off, only to find themselves surrounded by a swarm of angry snakes. It was dismal. Every crevice became alive with fanged, hissing things. For each snake, the desperate men slew 10 more. They kept trying to kill them. Every time they would kill one, 10 more would pop up. 10 more seemed to lash out in its place. Strangely enough, one man seemed to just sort of stand aside from the fight when the indignant voices of his struggling companions reproached him for not engaging in the fight with the snakes. He called back to them, "If we remain here, we shall be dead before the snakes. There's just too many of them. I am searching for a way to escape from the pit for all of us." This short tale is, again, very Jewish and can give us an image of what is possible, of who we might become, and where we might take this thing we call Jewishness, or I like to call Jewiness, when we get to the other side of our current condition as Jews, as Jewish Americans, and as part of God's creation. As we welcome a new year, the birthday of the world, according to the rabbis, I hope that we will open our minds and our hearts to thinking beyond this pit in which we find ourselves. Long-term thinking, big picture thinking, is the way of Torah. It is the most important principle, or one of the most important principles of the Jewish tradition. It's about finding anchors to moor our turbulent souls, to seek and be curious, to attach ourselves to the gifts of our ancestors in deed and in faith, and as Rabbi Mason Barkin spoke of last night, to seek and pounce on acts of hope. This morning, I want to think less, and I hope I get this right, and if I don't, I am sure our physicians will correct me. This morning, I want to think less with my amygdala, which is almost impossible for Jews. That's where we process emotion. And I want to think more with my prefrontal cortex. Did I get that right? That's the more rational part, yes? Yes, that's, okay, thank you, doctors, doctor. I want to think more with my prefrontal cortex. Now I've got swagger. It is here that we can use both abstract thinking and creative thinking to come up with ideas. This morning, I'd like to posit 3 core principles on which I believe, as Jews, we can better understand ourselves in relationship to the events of the past year that will no doubt continue in the year to come. While it was very tempting for me to use this Devar Torah to provide an analysis of anti-Semitism, which I'm sure rabbis throughout the country are doing this morning, I'm sorry to disappoint. Jew hatred is the oldest form of hatred in the world. It's not going anywhere, and I can't solve it in Devar Torah, but what I can do is help us and hopefully help myself. And maybe I'm just talking to myself, but I'm convinced right now that opening our minds to other aspects of Jewish life other than anti-Semitism, to pivot and think of how we can be proactive rather than reactive, to seek and to find the core principles of Jewish peoplehood, which may help us to better respond to Jew hatred, to those who don't like us very much. This morning, let's explore the principles of Jewish learning, Jewish peoplehood, and Jewish essence. Judaism is built, Jewish learning, number one. Judaism is built upon one guiding principle, our Torah, which is called a tree of life. That is right, a tree of life, life being the operative word, not death. Of creation, not destruction. Of peace, not war. That is the fundamental idea of Judaism. So while I understand how the pogrom of October 7th triggered a renewed vigor in the hearts of so many people, I also know that this level of connection to fighting anti-Semitism and this prism in all manners of time and space may not ultimately be what sustains us, because it never has. The principle of Jewish learning must be reshaped, readapted, and rethought of. For the past year, I have seen, and I'm sure you have, seen, heard, read, and witnessed a lack of basic Jewish literacy among our people when combating anti-Semitism. It is as if feelings of Jewish are there in a very deep and profound way, but the connection between those feelings and the thought of our tradition, of our heritage over the millennia are in a state of disconnect. Think about it. How many times do we find ourselves stuck in a conversation defending Israel, or Judaism for that matter, and we're stuck because we don't have enough lexicon, vocabulary, literacy? Unable to find words and ideas or knowledge of how to engage, we simply say, you're wrong, you're a Jew hater, I'm right, I'm Jewish, even though I don't really know what that means sometimes. How many times or how often do we wish we just knew more, knew something of substance to engage in a conversation about Jewish life? I do not mean to be crude or judgmental at all. I get it. I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up in the same religious schools that you did. I just think it's time for us to rethink how to make Jewish learning thicker for our students, adults and children alike, students of all ages, thicker. How we can become more literate Jewish community so we are better prepared, if not at least better prepared to face those who don't like us from a place of knowledge. I hope we can all find space and time to learn more about this thing that we care so deeply about. And I hope you will bring your ideas and your questions to us, because Rabbi Mason Barkin and I are here as teachers above all else. And we love, love, love teaching. And we love it when people find a deeper understanding and a life-affirming message from this tree of life connected to themselves. But Jewish learning is a drip, drip, drip. You cannot find one book in which to learn everything there is to know. So let us help you turn the faucet on. So the drip, drip, drip is more steady, more consistent, and not wait for another event in Israel or in our Jewish world to react, but be prepared proactively. Jewish peoplehood. This is the most challenging Jewish principle of all, especially in our times. As we may for us, let me say that again. I'm not a morning person. This is the most challenging Jewish principle of our times, for we may identify as more than Jewish. American Jews in particular have not always found an anchor in their Jewishness because America is so compelling. And for many American Jews, this past year has caused an acute identity crisis when it comes to Israel and Zionism and anti-Semitism. So what are we? Or even more important, what are we not? The author and scholar Dara Horn, who we've hosted here at Beth Israel, illustrates the following, that this is unhelpful to try to pigeonhole ourselves somewhere or identify. It is unhelpful. For example, to apply categories of race or religion or ethnicity or nationality to a group of people who predate all of those categories. Is that helpful? We predate everything, as we're going to read in the Torah this morning. If anything, the history of the Jewish people has taught us again and again and again that we are not like everyone else, and perhaps we never will be because we never were. That's a hard pill to swallow, which is why Jewish identity is so hard for us. We never were. This past year, if it's taught us anything else, is that we have to be honest about that, about what Jewish peoplehood means, and maybe push ourselves to the point of discomfort sometimes to accept, as an example, that the fate of the Jews in Israel matters to us, and that ultimately it does not matter to most of the world, because most of the world doesn't care about us. And if you haven't watched television or read a newspaper in the last year, that doesn't make sense. But if you have, let's be honest. The rest of the world does not care about us. For me, being part of the Jewish people means, among many things, that it's okay for me to stand, and it's okay for me to take a side when it comes to the people of Israel and the Jewish state. Even when we here, and those who live in the Jewish state there, don't even agree among ourselves, we're all in the same tent, together and alone. I side with the Jewish people. I side with the Jewish state, and I don't apologize for it. There was a pogrom on October 7th. And our fellow Jews are suffering. Our fellow Jews are suffering, and it's scary for me to think that there are Jews who are more concerned about how Israel's response reflects on them and less concerned with what happened on October 7th and what it means for our people in the prism of history and in this moment. It was more than just one picture in time. It was a calling for us, each of us, to identify, whether Jewish or not, and many members of our congregation are not in fact Jewish, but identify as living in a Jewish house, and therefore you count and you're stuck with us. And we are grateful and blessed that you do. It is also not a sin to feel saddened by the loss of innocent human beings, men, women, and children, who died tragically as a result of Hamas's war against the Jews. But friends, to me, and all due respect to those who may not agree, our family are in those dungeons of Gaza. And until they are released, to me at least, nothing else matters. Nothing. Than getting them out and getting them home and removing the people who stole them in the first place. It is a justified war, and it is messy. War is bad. But as Ecclesiastes say, there is a time for peace and there's a time for war. And we are in a time for war, and it is a justified war, and it's messy, and it will save Israel so that our grandchildren can go and see the miracle that is the modern state of Israel and feel the same pride that I do and we do that it exists. The last principle comes from the Jewish phrase, Ha'ikar chaser min hasefer. The essence is missing from the book. It's like one of those books that you read in college that is 3/4 of a page footnotes with a paragraph on top. There's nothing in there. It's not telling us or teaching us anything. That is, and in the intellectual tradition of Judaism, a curse. This principle is meant also for us, especially on this day and in this time, because Judaism cannot be either understood or lived abstractly. Our Jewish souls cannot only be stirred as a response to Jew hatred or threats from the outside. While I've been so moved by the overwhelming participation and motivation of so many members this past year, many of whom have been present, engaged, and involved like never before, I worry that many Jews beyond these walls will feel that all of Judaism can be reduced to anti-Semitism. We cannot afford to define our future by getting so stuck in the present and past so as to get stuck in our current condition. Our essence is that of choosing life and living our lives with a sense of purpose to something that is higher than ourselves and broader than this moment. The answer in this principle of Jewish essence is not that people hate us, but rather found in the idea that we are part of something bigger, that we are Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. While we live in a world of universalistic ideas, it is through our Jewish particularism that we may find both meaning and the essence of our lives. This principle can be found most notably at our Seder tables every year, where we ratify through the story the relationship between faith and God, a sense of connectivity, and a sense of collective memory. Past, present, and future, big picture thinking, and being part of something bigger than ourselves. These three ideas or principles will not inoculate us from the hatred of others. However, Jewish learning, an unapologetic understanding of Jewish peoplehood, and our role in the Jewish world, and through its essence, the essence of Judaism, knowing that there is something bigger than ourselves, can be easier, or ease the burden at least, when things are hard. These principles have guided me. They make my life a little easier when things get crazy. They have guided me through this most traumatic, heart-wrenching, and painful year. And with God's help and our motivation, these principles will enable each one of us to find deeper meaning, wonder, curiosity, and to find our place in the ongoing and forever story of the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Shana Tova. Rosh